Okay, so it is August 17th at 8 p.m. and this is a roundtable for the Florida Coalition of School Board Members on the Sunshine solution for testing, standardized testing. And the basic order of events will be a welcome from the president, Jeff Bergosh of Florida Coalition of School Board Members, and he'll give us a little background about the coalition. And then Erica Donalds will take the mic and present information on the opportunity costs of testing that she's done. And then we'll get to hear the exciting developments in Seminole and around the state from Amy Lockhart, Dr. Griffin, and Dr. Cody, sorry. I'm your moderator, Sean Frost. I'm a school board member here in Indian River County and the vice president of the Florida Coalition of School Board Members. I see we have with us also an honored guest. Senator Alan Hayes seems to be in the audience. I'm going to... Senator Hayes, welcome.
Yes, sir. Good evening. How is everyone?
Great. Good to have you.
Well, thanks for letting me join. I'm in your camp, honey.
Well, that's great to hear. Thank you.
Great. So with no further ado, Jeff, would you like to say a few words?
Well, first of all, I want to thank all of our distinguished guests, Senator Hayes, fellow school, all other staff members that are on the call. We really appreciate you taking time out of your Monday evening. The basics on the Florida Coalition: Sean Frost, Erica Donald, Bridget Ziegler, myself, Amy Lockhart, and a handful of others over the last 8 months or so have just, we're just kind of fed up with the status quo. I guess I'll start there. We're tired of just the adversarial relationship that the School Board Association has pretty much fostered with the legislature. We want to work together with our legislators. We want to be more parent and student-centered and more focused on, creating beneficial alliances, less of this animosity that seems to be going crazy out there between the Florida School Board Association, the unions, and the others who always want to scream and yell at people, particularly the legislatures. We want to form better relationships. So that's number one. We want to give students more choice. We want to balance the need for accountability with a reduction in assessments, and we're going to hear a great presentation from Erica on that. She's done a lot of work on this and has some great ideas. And then, and I know that Amy from Seminole County is going to present some ideas as well. So, we want to be partners with the legislators. We want to be a conduit from the grassroots students. And we've got a small team we're building. We've made some inroads in the legislature last year with House Bill 549 to give board members the opportunity to individually allocate their portion of dues money, inject some competition into the whole thing. And we're going to have a pretty robust legislative agenda this term. But that's it in a nutshell. And we've got a great small team. We're working hard, and we're gonna get some things done. So, Sean, I'm putting this together on short notice, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Jeff. And we'll have sort of a freewheeling roundtable, more open forum at the very end. And of course, I forgot to mention Dr. Rendell, the brand new superintendent here in Indian River County. He's going to also join us and share his superintendent's experience. We weren't sure if we were going to be able to have Dr. Griffin and the team up there in Seminole. So it's great to have all the viewpoints from the professional educators, if you will. So, yes.
Sean, this is Alan Hayes. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I wonder if it'd be appropriate for me to let the group know the entrance point, if you will, that I'm coming from. I was the one who offered the amendment in the Senate this past year to Senate Bill 616 that suspended, if you will, the utilization of the FSA results until that test had been validated.
Oh.
And I am terrifically embarrassed, quite candidly, by the quilt work that we have today as our educational system. in my comment there on the floor on 616, I compared it to a train wreck. And I think people were well-intentioned. I know I can speak for myself and the overwhelming majority of my colleagues. As we voted over the years on the different elements of our educational plan, we took the word of those so-called experts. We did this, we did that, and we just got a patchwork of stuff. And I welcome this opportunity to receive from the school board members the Sunshine Plan or the Seminole Plan, whatever you want to call it. I don't care. But to me, as a policy maker who has never spent a day in a classroom other than as a student, in the public schools, and I've lectured dental meetings all over the country over my career in dentistry, but we need the input from the people in the classroom and the people in the boardroom, and we welcome this opportunity to work with you. Having said all that, the one disclaimer that I have is I am basically unimportant in the educational realm in the legislature because I don't sit on any of the education committees. I do sit on the Appropriations Committee, and that's where I put the amendment on last year. And I'm very willing to do as many amendments as we need to do to bring this about. But we can talk more about the process later. But I just want to let everybody know that I'm not just a saboteur, if you will. I'm here to listen, and I am definitely wanting to bring about significant reform as soon as we can for our students. That's where we need to focus, is what's best for the students, and let all this accountability and all these other catchwords go down the street without any accompaniment.
Thank you, Senator. And that is exactly one of the purposes of the coalition forming was, as Jeff mentioned, we want to be better partners and better counselors for our friends up in Tallahassee, so that we provide them with a street level view, if you will, and hopefully warn against some unintended consequences as they come and head things off. So it's wonderful to have you join us. The coalition has actually had very productive and fruitful meetings with some of the leaders in the education realm, not on this particular topic, but we've received a very warm welcome because, as Senator Hayes says, they're reasonable people in Tallahassee if we help them and give them our view and bring solutions. And that's the whole purpose of this meeting. That's why it's the Sunshine Solution, right? Is we're going to work together and come up with a plan that is number one about the students, as Senator Hayes said. The Florida Coalition of School Board Members is fiercely dedicated to student success. We always put the student first. So and sometimes that upsets the adults in the system, but at the end of the day, it's about having a well-educated next generation of Americans to take over when we're ready to step down. So with that, Erica, are you ready to continue? I'll go ahead and share my screen and pull up your memo, okay? Oops. Okay. Sorry, it's not sharing my screen. Okay, can you see my screen? Let's see. Erica? Are you there? No?
I'm not on the computer, but I'm looking at the memo. We're looking at the memo.
We are, and I think we've lost Erica. She appears as offline. So perhaps we will improvise, adapt, and overcome and move forward with the team in Seminole.
Good plan.
Okay. All right, can you see my screen and do you see the Seminole solution on it?
Yep, we're good.
Okay. At this point, I'd like to hand over the presentation to you, Amy, and you can moderate from there.
Okay, great. Thank you. First of all, I want to thank you so much for bringing everybody together on this topic. Of course, it's incredibly timely, and it's great that the legislature is meeting back early this year, because that might give us an opportunity to get some of these things taken care of sooner rather than later. So we're being hopeful in that regard. But, just as a background, this really came about after, of course, all of the debacle of last year's spring testing season, and just like all of you, we as board members here in Seminole County were incredibly frustrated and felt very helpless and didn't really know what to do about what had happened. And in reaching out to some members of our legislative delegation who felt very similar to Senator Hayes, also felt helpless and said, okay, we get it, we know there's a problem, but what do we do to fix it? We want a solution from you. So this really is the result of that. And just as right off the bat, I think Senator Hayes hit the nail on the head. We don't care what we call it either. You can call it purple bunnies for all we care. We just want what's best for our students as well. So we've purely started calling it the Seminole solution just so it was easy to identify. And obviously, from a social media perspective, it's nice to have a little hashtag. It helps to spread the word a little bit. I think the biggest thing, and I will turn this over to Dr. Griffin shortly, because this really is the result of his many years of experience in the educational field and working with all different types of testing. But really, accountability is something that none of us are afraid of. Competition is something that none of us are afraid of. But truly, with the current system that we have set up, there is no way for your typical public school student to truly be compared and be able to be competitive with private school students, with scholarship students, with students around the country, because we've created a test that is unique to us, although our standards, I would argue, are not unique, although some obviously believe that they are, but that'll be a topic Dr. Griffin can cover. This really is about spurring on discussion so that we can talk together about what the best solution is. It may be a variation on this theme. This is certainly not the end-all, be-all. We recognize that, and we're excited to have a group to share ideas with. One of the great things that I think is important to point out is that what we're asking for truly in using standardized tests, such as the Iowa or the SAT, could be another standardized nationally normed test, is that those tests are already allowed by law. The legislature, the Board of Education, DOE has already told school districts that we are permitted to use these tests for good cause exemption. And of course, for the tax credit scholarship programs, they're required that students take those tests as well. And of course, now we have teachers who are able to get bonuses based on their SAT scores, whether or not that's a good idea. But the point is that the legislature has already declared that they put credence in these tests. The state already pays for every 10th grader to take the PSAT. So clearly the DOE must believe that there is some value in administering it. So we're really not asking for anything other than what is already permitted by law, except that we want our traditional public school students to be able to have that same ability to compete and show what they know through those same tests. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Griffin and let him walk you through the Sunshine Solution.
Thank you, Ms. Lockhart. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I want to begin just where Ms. Lockhart actually began about the name. We really don't want this to be called Seminole Solution. We're certainly hoping that there's more interest statewide and we can change the name to represent all of us. And also, this solution is a suggestion. And there are a few different ways to go about it, and we are very open and flexible in discussing a solution. We mentioned and suggested Iowa and SAT. There may be 2 other nationally normed tests that are better. But really, our goal with all of this was to respond to our elected officials who were tired and wanted a proactive solution to FSA. And we wanted to get this out there to create a little disruption, to cause some discussion around the state, and that is happening, and I'm actually very happy where this is right now. Now, all that being said, I'm going to work you quickly through the solution, and just, feel free to stop me at any time if necessary. I think first, Ms. Lockhart went through the accountability, the response, and a valid and reliable solution, so I'm going to jump right into district flexibility. We are not opposed to computer-based testing. I want to make that clear. What we are opposed to is the lack of flexibility. Every district has different needs, and they have different technology to utilize for testing. We need a platform that is both computer-based and paper-pencil, so districts can make those decisions. Right now, we're trying to fit everybody into exactly the same mold, and as a result, we are wasting massive days of important instructional time to get students into computer labs. Districts should be able to make that decision. I know in our district, I'd probably do paper pencil for some grades and maybe some computer-based testing, a combination, but I don't want to tie up the technology that we have for such a long period of time because the technology was purchased for instruction, not for testing. So the flexibility between computer-based and paper pencil, I think, is very, very important. With that solution comes a return of test data. We have gotten so used to this lousy customer service where we get our test results back late during the summer. My gosh, we don't even have this year's results back yet. Could you imagine if we gave a nationally normed test and we had our data returned to us before the students left for the summer? We could appropriately place the students in summer school and schedule them for the next year. We have gotten the original sell to this state. I was administrator at the time for computer-based testing was for the quick turnaround. We have not seen that. We need something that we can get back into our parents' hands, our schools' hands, and to our students' hands prior to them leaving for the summer. We really think it's important that we look as a district and as a state how our students are performing nationally and internationally. Just using a criterion reference test is only working within the Florida standards, and the comparison is only within the state. Our community wants to know how our students are doing outside of Florida. Now, we had Iowa and College Board give a presentation at our last board meeting to really work us through, and I think we have a slide to talk about criterion and norm reference, and we'll work you through that because we learned a lot. And bottom line is I learned that the data that is produced and the information that we are given from the 2 nationally normed tests that we looked at is all we need to inform instruction and make the curriculum decisions that we need to make. We do not need what we're going to get from FSA. We can get more, better, and certainly faster from these nationally normed companies. The other piece that has been a concern, and I know all of you have dealt with this, there is I can't even say perception because I agree with it, FSA is shrouded in secrecy. Our families and our teachers cannot get the information that they need. The nationally normed tests that we're looking at are extremely transparent. Parents will know what items their students did not perform well on. They can look at past and previous issues of the exam, and it's a transparent process. We looked at the SAT because in addition to naming areas where students do not do well, you probably have heard they have partnered with Khan Academy so that students can be remediated immediately in areas that they are not doing well in. So those are, I don't want to reiterate all that Ms. Lockhart said because she covered most of it, but for us it's about flexibility with computer-based and paper pencil. It's about using a nationally normed test instead of a criterion reference test, and it's about getting the test results back to do what we need to do. When we get our test data back, and I get this after the validity and all this stuff in September, we're going to be so far into this school year that it's our internal measures that are going to inform instruction, not the data that we get from FSA. Team, you want to add anything before we? Okay.
Well, I think another interesting thing to point out, and you know, as an elected board member, of course, those of us who are accountable to our communities are in a little different position than maybe an appointed superintendent or our staff members. It truly, I believe, is our responsibility as elected school board members to say the things that need to be said and to champion causes that need to be championed. And we are very fortunate that Dr. Griffin and his team have been willing to speak up because it's what is right for students. And it's important that we recognize that while the Commissioner of Education certainly has a very important role, she answers to the Board of Education. Those are the folks that she is hired by and is accountable to. And so at this point in time, I think after the many correspondences that we have had, that our staff has had with DOE and the response that we've had from the Commissioner, and then another letter, I don't know if you have it up there, and the response from Ms. Tappan, but we're at the point in Seminole County where we feel that obviously our staff needs to continue to interact with DOE because that's who we get some of our direction from in terms of rulemaking. But from an elected standpoint, we really need to start reaching out to the Board of Education, to legislators like Senator Hayes, to the governor, so that they truly can understand that the team that they have in place there really is not being as responsive as perhaps they should be to local school districts. They've really hamstrung us. So, you know, we can certainly have more discussion about how we could go about doing that, but I think that's sort of where we are from an elected board member perspective, is that it's time for us to start having conversations with some different folks around the table. And I'd be happy to open it up at this point for questions, comments, suggestions, whatever you'd like to do at this point, Sean.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great. Okay, so I've heard through the grapevine that you've been calling around a little bit, Amy, and seeing what the level of support is. If you could give us an update on that.
Yeah, I sent out an email actually to every board member in the state, just letting them know here's what we're doing, and we'd love to, you know, have you all at least be a part of the conversation. It had quite a bit of response from that, I think, considering it was over the summer and people hadn't really plugged back in yet. We have our board clerk has been calling around and emailing to other board clerks just to see, has it been on your agenda? Has the conversation been broached? Where are you in terms of support? We have several districts that have actually written letters of support or have made it a part of their legislative platform. We have other districts that have said, well, because of whatever their process is to get something on the agenda, well, it'll be on their next agenda. Some have said, well, we kind of want to wait and see what other people do first. We understand not everybody is you know, quite as willing to stir the pot as some of us, as natural pot stirrers.
That's what we live to do.
I would, yeah. I would say there are folks, districts all along the spectrum in terms of interest in getting on board. I think we've probably, I haven't seen the latest spreadsheet, but I think we're probably around 12 to 15 different districts that have pledged some level of support.
Wow. Great. That's excellent. Okay, Erica, if you're ready, I think we're ready for your portion of the presentation, and we can continue with more questions at the end. You ready, Erica?
Great. And can you hear me now okay?
Yep.
Yes. Can you hear me now okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry about the technical difficulties earlier, but I think this is a great segue into the memorandum that we're going to talk about. As you can see, this memorandum was dated March 24th of this year. So this was in the middle of the legislative session. My co-author and I were actually started on this in November of last year after seeing all of the testing and how it affected the students' instructional time. We wanted to put some numbers to what we were hearing from teachers, students, and parents about their concerns. And I'm sure as elected school board members, you all are hearing the same thing. So how we went about doing this was to look at how we can break down the lost instructional time. At the time of this memo, Senator Legg had introduced the bill that ultimately did pass, which capped the test time at 5%. And Commissioner Stewart just wrote the letter that she was sent to Governor Scott with a bunch of recommendations, including eliminating one of the 11th grade exams. But in totality, and looking at all the solutions that were put forth in the legislature and by the DOE, it was clear to me that they were missing the point. And I think that's where we are as school board members, certainly where I see us going with the sunshine solution. So just to kind of walk you through some of these items, the summary here. When we added up the indirect cost of testing, of time and money, we came up with about 10% of class time being affected by test taking. The superintendent just mentioned where you're shuffling students around to the computers because we don't have that paper option. That's a main focus as well, to give districts that flexibility for accommodating whatever technology they do have, and the students that need those paper exams, so that we're not losing time simply because we only have half a class here and half a class there. That was part of this. When you add up those 10% of class time each year, we came up with an estimate of about 1 full school year affected by testing from K to 12, which is obviously very significant. And for the entire state, when we take the amount of time that a student is spending testing or being affected by testing, and you're calculating, the calculations are in here, I'll go over that in a second, but if you calculate how much we spend kind of per hour of student instruction time, that's where we come up with the $2 billion. It's really an opportunity cost. You're spending this money for the students to be in school, you're spending it on teachers and resources, but instead of instructing those students, you were testing those students during that time. So we want to minimize that, of course, as much as possible. So when you read the memo and it's talking about current bills under consideration, of course, that's during the legislative session when we put the memo out. And I just want to draw your attention to, at the end of page 1 here, the first, sorry, Sean, got ahead of, but on page 1, there is a green check mark at the end of the page, or towards the end of the page. And these are some of the improvements that we suggested. Administering paper tests, reducing or eliminating the retakes, student accountability, including promotion and graduation based on a portfolio of measures, or a selection of national norm reference assessments. Now, not only does it solve some of the issues that were mentioned by Ms. Lockhart and the superintendent, but it also creates less of a focus on this single test and accountability measure. What I've seen with my own children in Collier County is, you know, the effort to kind of game the test, find out what is on the test and how are we going to teach to that test. And another benefit that we can look for in using some of these national norm reference tests and having a selection of them is getting away from that test focus that we saw with FCAT over the years, where districts were able to kind of know what that test was going to look like, and a lot of the instruction was focused on how the test is taken and not necessarily on a broader measure of proficiency. On page 2, just going forward on some of the additional points, at the end, diversifying measures of student learning and accountability, as I just mentioned. The ensuring end of course assessments are given at the end of the school year. This is another issue that contributed significantly to lost instruction time. One of the things that we tried to measure was a loss of focus after the FSA or FCAT or end of course exams are given. As you know, those windows are fairly early, so you're not getting the full 180 days of instruction time before you test. there is no question that students and teachers are going to lose focus after the high stakes test is over. So it's not a matter of whether it happens, but to what extent does it happen. So we need to ensure that those end of course assessments are given as close to the end of the school year as possible, and that could be accomplished by paper-based exams. I know one of the reasons why we have to shuffle so much and we start our testing so early is because of the limitations of technology. We can just move down, Sean, to figure 1 on page 5. And of course, you guys, if you have any questions about other stuff that you're reading on the memo as you're looking through it, feel free to contact me. But I just want to go over a couple of key points. One of the points that we made was, I think we're all on the same page that the accountability measures that have been put in place in Florida over the past 15 years have done significant improvement to our education system. And we saw that in our scores and our ranking for quite some time. However, over the past 6, 7, 8 years, we've seen kind of a leveling off of improvement in our scores. This figure 1 actually looks at the NAEP ranking relative to other states. So you see dramatic improvement from in the 40s to down to 24, and then we've kind of leveled off from there. Figure 2, I'm going to just go down a bit, Sean. This is actually by cohort. So this is telling you how the 4th graders performed, and then those same 4th graders, when they are in 8th grade, how they're ranking. And so you can see that in 2003, they ranked very close to one another. In 2005, they're a little bit further apart. Now, when you're thinking about the 3rd grade high stakes test, that's where we're seeing this improvement in the 4th grade scores, because we're not allowing them to go to 4th grade until they're ready to do 4th grade work. So that's where I think we're seeing this great improvement in 4th grade scores and rankings. Unfortunately, we're not seeing that same improvement in the 8th grade scores of those same students. So we have to figure out what's happening between 4th and 8th grade that we're missing out on that dramatic improvement for those same students when they get to those higher grades. And this doesn't necessarily support what we're talking about, the sunshine solution. What it does support is that we've got to do something else. You know, the high stakes tests have gotten us to a certain point. I think we can all agree it's gone a little too far. Now we've kind of ridden that wave, and we need to look at other ways to ensure that we continue to improve performance of our students in Florida. Table 1 on page 11. We just go to that.
Sorry, it takes a minute
This
to
is kind
catch
of where
up.
we broke down the lost instructional time. That's okay. I'll just do a little intro for it. So as I said, the lost instructional time we calculate is around 10%, and when we get to this table 1 on page 11, you'll see where we kind of broke that down between FCAT. That's the data that we have at the time. The state mandated EOCs. At the time, the district required EOCs. I know many districts have either taken those out. Collier County has chosen to keep all of the class level EOCs, even those that are not required. Benchmarks, we actually do benchmark testing as well 4 times a year. So that's obviously not going to be the same for every district. But you can see one of the main drivers of the 9.6% total is this loss of focus at the end of the year, which definitely could be affected by allowing for paper exams, allowing for a selection of national norm reference tests, and not being subjected to the state's testing windows. Finally, I will go to chapter 4, and I didn't put the page number on here, so I will find it. It's on page 16. And this just kind of talks about our solutions and recommendations. Some of it, basically, we've already talked about on the call, so I'll let you take a look at it. Some things, most things were not addressed in the legislative session, so we're definitely looking towards the next session to see how we can incorporate some of this. And it goes right into the sunshine solution. I think that these two things coming from different directions certainly segue together very well, and hopefully we can come together as school board members. And as Amy said, we are the ones who can speak out about this. I have to tell you what the Department of Education's response to this memo was. You would think that, you know, they would take some of this information, maybe try to refute some of the stats or give us some additional information, respond to some of the claims or some of the solutions. They didn't do any of that. Their response was that districts should be the ones doing this research and analysis, not school board members and citizens. So I thought that was a pretty interesting response, that it kind of goes along with what we were just talking about their being a bit out of touch with the direction that we're going.
Great. Well, thank you.
Is anyone surprised by that response from DOE?
Surprising, unfortunately.
Yeah, this is Bridget here, and thank you everyone for all of. I mean, this is just. I'm very excited about this opportunity, and I love that it's solution based, because I think that's where we really want to differentiate ourselves, especially after coming off the heels of this year and speaking to so many legislators who threw their hands up and knew that this was a train going very fast in the wrong direction, but really wanted to look to us to help with solutions as opposed to just complaining. While testing is definitely not my area of expertise, I'm very fortunate to have the two of you specifically leading this cause and helping us kind of understand the way. And I'm hoping that as we continue moving forward, something like the response of the DOE, so they can see. I think what I found, even from the legislature, is this from the typical, there's such a finger pointing back and forth, and I think we're just really trying to reduce that and remove whatever that aura has been in the past, and look to each other as partnering together and just trying to work through things, so that when we do provide a comprehensive solution like Erica Donalds had provided, that we get a little bit different of a response. And sometimes I think that you know, if I think about back to a presentation that the DOE did at one of the FSBA's conferences, it was a very hostile room, and I can understand why, the frustration, but it just was not a productive meeting at the end of the day, and that's not going to ever move us forward, and at the end of the day, that's just going to hurt the students. So again, thank you for everyone for showing up and for the hard work that you guys are doing.
Thanks, Bridget. And Bridget is a school board member in Sarasota County, for those of you. She wasn't here when we did introductions. So thanks, Bridget. Again, this is Sean. Up here you see some of these comparative sample test timings, and I think that that's pretty interesting data. Speaking of which, I think Dr. Mark Rendell, Indian River County Superintendent of Schools, has some ideas he'd like to share, and maybe some updates. You said you have some new information for us, Mark?
First of all, I just want to thank you guys for having me join you. We definitely defer to Dr. Griffin as the senior superintendent in the room, so to speak, since I've only been doing this for a little over a month. But, you know, the Seminole solution, just to give you guys a little background of what we've done in Indian River, I shared the initial letter that Dr. Griffin sent with the board a few weeks ago at a board workshop, and all 5 board members were on board in supporting such a solution to the situation that we're in. So I did draft a letter and shared it with the board last week at a work session, and we did send it to Tallahassee, basically supporting Dr. Griffin's proposal, you know, with a few more reasons why. One of the reasons that I did a little bit of research and saw that Florida is not the only state that is considering, well, I guess we're the only ones considering at this point, dropping a state test and going to national norm reference tests. There's about at least 6 that I found, most recently Connecticut and New Hampshire, Minnesota, Montana, and a few others, Arkansas. And I believe Iowa's been using the Iowa assessment the whole time. And so this isn't something that we're the only ones facing. Most of them had either Smarter Balanced or PARC. And so with Smarter Balanced and PARC running into issues as well. Those are other supposed state assessments based on Common Core or national standards. And so the ones that are dropping those, a lot of it's because of the pushback against Common Core. But in reality, what they're finding is that the national assessments that they're choosing, and most of them are choosing the Iowa assessment, is going to provide them with just as good, if not better, results. And Dr. Griffin's slides showed what value the normed reference test can provide. In fact, those of us that have been around a little while remember that the FCAT used to have two sections in math and reading. They used to have the FCAT 2.0, so to speak, section that test, one day you would test on that, but the next day you would test on an NRT section. And Dr. Griffin for sure can remember that. And that data was actually used as concordant scores and used to place students. It was used to inform instruction. In fact, that was the thing I wanted to stress the most, is that we preach to our teachers that assessment is supposed to be used to inform instruction, or the results of assessment are supposed to be used to inform instruction. And as Dr. Griffin stated earlier, we don't have the results from last year's test. I mean, we're several months removed from the testing session, and we don't have any results to do anything with. So, as he stated, when we do finally get those results, I'm not sure how well we'll be able to use them. So, the advantages of the proposal to use these nationally normed reference tests, one of the things I concentrated in my letter was the fact that we can get the results back much faster, and if that's the goal of assessment, is to inform instruction, then we'd be able to do that. Just like Dr. Griffin stated, we could do some work over the summer to get the kids ready for the following year, not just wait till 6 months later, like the autopsy kind of thing, and not have the results soon enough. Dr. Griffin stated earlier that he wasn't sure if maybe the two tests that they've chosen would be the best. From the little research I've done, the Iowa assessment definitely would be the best for grades 3 through 8. So I would support sticking with that. And then I think the PSAT and SAT again would be the right way to go for a 9th and 10th grade, or at least a high school assessment. The Iowa assessment folks do make a high school battery, a 9th and 10th grade battery, but the PSAT and the SAT have that name recognition and have that college readiness reputation already. In fact, if you think about it, we're still administering the PSAT to 10th graders anyway. We're already doing it. And, we've talked with our high school principals about the opportunity to give an ACT to every junior next year as a way to measure how well we're preparing our students for college and career. Aside from all this, we were looking at that because it's a national measure and it's used to help kids get into college. It's used to measure their college readiness and all that. So it's almost, if you think about it, if we did go to this solution where we were offering the PSAT and the SAT to every 9th and 10th grader, then we're going to be accomplishing more than just finding a national standard to measure our students again. We're going to be giving them that first step towards their college readiness, and it can really do a lot for us to decide who goes into AP courses and who needs what kind of remediation. And if your aspirations are for college and you score low on one section of the SAT, as was stated earlier, you can definitely find some ways to increase your skills in that area before the next time you take the SAT, and you can do even better. So I don't really have much to add to what already has been said, except that I think Seminole's already picked out the two best assessments. I think the work that was done by Collier is fantastic. I actually think you may have underestimated the amount of time lost. In the literature that you put out, I didn't notice. Almost every school I've ever been at, even when we were doing paper, pencil, FCAT, we would almost always do some kind of practice. before the FCAT or before the FSA. We used to call it the FCAT scrimmage. And the last couple of years when we've gone to computer-based, at most of the buildings I've been associated with, we'll run the kids through the computer lab a few weeks before the actual assessment, just so they're comfortable. We'll have them come in, log on to, some program, maybe FCAT Explorer back in the day or something. So there's more time lost even than what you probably found, unless you found that when you surveyed your schools. But, we actually take time out to go get comfortable in the room and that kind of thing, especially when you're going to a computer lab that's not your normal classroom. So the multiple advantages of paper pencil, even though, like Dr. Griffith stated, the technology was supposed to make this instantaneous. It's mind-boggling that with the technology we're waiting longer than we did with paper pencil. And these national assessments, they could turn that data around to us very quickly, and so that's another advantage. The only other thing I'd like to share is what we have done so far in Indian River. Like I said, we did draft a letter to send to the commissioner, and we did send that. I haven't got a response back yet. But, the board is going to make that part of their legislative platform that they share with legislators in a couple weeks. But I also did have a chance to communicate some of this to Mike Olenek, who is on the state board. He was at a meeting I was at in Fort Pierce a couple weeks ago, just days, I guess it was last week or 2 weeks ago, just days before the board met. And we weren't able to cover this in the meeting, but I told him I had something I wanted to share with him. So for email communication, I gave him a copy of Dr. Griffin's letter, a copy of my letter, and then some articles that I'd found on the internet about other states changing, dropping their state assessments for national normed reference tests. So I don't know if I added any more data or anything, but just another perspective that this is definitely in the best interest of our students and teachers if we were able to do something like this.
Great. Thanks, Dr. Rendell. Erica, you had something you'd like to share? Or was that?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to that. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
I just want to respond to that about, we were pretty conservative with the estimates, but absolutely there are other things that could have been added. What we did was had our superintendent fill out basically a matrix of testing data on all of the tests that are given to all the students in the district, and with quite a large number of items. Or do you have that, Sean? You're awesome. So I can share this with anyone else. I mean, this is the only way I was going to actually get the data out of our district to add up all of the testing time. So if you may not have a superintendent like these wonderful ones that are here on the call that would be amenable to this kind of research, you may just want to provide them with an Excel spreadsheet just to fill out, where you'd be able to add up this amount of data for your own district. And we were able to put it together after getting the information from this matrix that we asked them to fill out. So we really just used what was on that matrix with the timing of the tests and all of that. So there's certainly other things, like I use the example, and I think it's mentioned in the memo, of the pep rallies that are done for FCAT or FSA. There's certainly time put into that, and the music videos that the teachers are putting together and broadcasting online, all of these things that go along with the testing that I could certainly do without.
Yeah, it certainly has affected the culture, it seems, and all the ancillary details. So I think that it's great to have the input of like-minded superintendents like Dr. Rendell and Dr. Griffin to help guide us, so that when we do our research, we can say that the districts have participated. And I think Amy Seminole has something else they'd like to share.
Yes, I'm going to let Dr. Griffin add just a couple of items.
Great.
Thank you, Sean. First of all, Mark, thank you for your input. It's much appreciated and refreshing to hear. Erica, thank you for your paper. It's well done, and I'm anxious to sit down and go through the whole paper. Sean, we forwarded a couple of slides. I certainly don't need to go through them in detail, but these slides were really developed for the poor response I received from DOE. It's the only way that I can word it. The first one is just really a comparison of norm reference to criterion reference test. Really, the impression was given was that a nationally normed test could not give us the information that we need. We absolutely can get the information we need. We absolutely can get it in a timely manner. I mentioned briefly, I'll use Iowa as an example. If you use their paper pencil version, it takes 10 school days to get it back. If you do their computer based, it takes 24 to 48 hours. So just the turnaround time in and of itself, because we use other measures in addition, so these aren't such high stake tests. We have other measures to look at how the students are doing. But if you look at this slide that's up there, norm reference compared to criterion reference, look down to where it says uses for data, and just read those. It'll inform, norm reference will still inform instruction and adjustments to curriculum, help inform program placement. Well, Iowa and SAT will assess student growth. We put may in case the group wanted to go with a different test. It can assess mastery of standards, and it can measure instructional effectiveness. Because if it can measure student growth, we believe it could be used for VAM. And unfortunately, VAM becomes the reason why we can't do a lot of this stuff. But we need to put kids before this teacher growth model. It's very disappointing to hear that VAM has become the issue why we do some of the things that we do. On the right side, under uses for data, certainly criterion can assess mastery of standards. It will probably be able to assess student growth and measure instructional effectiveness, assuming it's valid and reliable. So we prepared this, and I think, Erica, with some of your work, we could probably even add a little more detail to this. But this is one issue that DOE had with our response, and we've even heard other districts afraid of using a norm reference as compared to criterion. Criterion, if you really think about it, you just artificially set a bar for students. It really doesn't mean anything other than to the people who set the bar. Why we should use something that psychometricians have used for decades to set a national norm and a national standard. It makes it just, the more you learn about it, the less sense this criterion makes, because I might as well just have a dartboard and throw it at it and have a number that we're going to use, because how many times did they change the FCAT score? So I am mathematically, norm reference has proven to me to be a fairer test to our children. The other thing I want to mention before we come off this, and Erica and Mark, I heard you both use the word high stakes, and these are high stakes tests, but I think part of whatever solution we come up with, especially in terms of graduation, we need to triangulate some data, and this shouldn't be the only measure that a student can earn graduation for. Maybe if they earn so many industry certifications, or maybe if they do well on their end of course exams, but let's not make it, it's people who make these tests high stake tests because they put all the eggs in the basket of one test. Why can't we triangulate and give students choices really that align to their pathways to graduation? So I think high stakes is what we make it and what DOE has made it. It doesn't have to be the end all for a student in terms of graduation or even third grade retention.
Great. I have moderator's privilege here. You mentioned the word fair. Now, in the nationally normed tests, it would seem as though perhaps they would remove many of the cultural biases that some say exist in the tests, or the concerns with AIR being primarily field tested with a very homogeneous group. Would you say that's true, Dr. Griffin?
Yeah, yes, and I would certainly say that when you look at the two tests we're talking about, Iowa and SAT, their items have been validated for years. They're reliable, and they look at every internal and existing, internal and external factor that could impact the questions. Certainly much more, and certainly much more time has been put into it than error.
Thank you. Thank you. Erica, you wanted to springboard or add something?
Yeah. One final thing, just to come off of your point, Dr. Griffin, about the VAM score, I would encourage you guys to take a look at the Collier County Legislative Platform. We just passed it last Tuesday. And we have one main point in there, and it brings both of these items together that we've talked about tonight. The first point is to allow the local districts to create their own teacher evaluation system that is state approved and that utilizes the 33% that the state is currently using of basically student performance test score data included in the evaluation score, but to allow that local control at the district level and have the state just approve what we come up with. We talked a lot about this. You know, VAM has just earned the ire of all of us, really. And although there's no perfect system, at least if there's an imperfect system at the local level, we can work to fix it. What we are dealing with, as you all know, at the state level is an imperfect system that just doesn't seem movable at all. So that's one piece. And then the other piece is asking for the flexibility to use these national norm referenced tests. So it's basically the sunshine solution, the Seminole solution, but put into the legislative platform. And that's the way our board chose to join up in this effort. So we tried to put both of those together into the legislative platform, and you know, definitely look at that or contact me. I'd be happy to help out with that.
Excellent, Erica. I like that direction. I'd like, Sean, if you could get us to the slide that's titled Math Standards and then English Language Arts Standards. I want to show you this because this is another response to DOE because they would not answer my question. All right, right there. I want you just to take a quick look. And I had a conversation with a very intelligent elected official prior to doing this, and he was really under the impression that Florida standards were significantly different than Common Core standards. And I want you to look, because DOE, if you read the response I received, you would think that there was not much alignment. So just look at the first column there where it says total number of Common Core state standards, and it says K8, 9, 12. You can read those numbers. Then to the right of that, the total number of Florida standards. Look how close those numbers are. And look at the addition of calculus. So that's 52 of the 90 some odd changes. Then go to, which is not tested, by the way. Go to the third column, total number of standards added or changed in shift from Common Core to Florida standards. 25 in K through 8, that's out of 234, and only 9 to 12. Then the last column is the one that really drives it home. The total number of changed standards that are actually assessed to Florida standards, 7 out of 234 and 8 out of 157. So I think that that's a very significant point, because Florida standards, call it what you want, it's Common Core. And go down to the second, it just shows, and we broke it down by percentage for you, mathematically, 3 through 5, 90.12%, remained unchanged, and 6 to 8, 98.76% unchanged. Now go to the next, the ELA. Next slide. Just a second. Here it comes. Okay, and I don't even have to work you through those numbers, but look at this. 414 Common Core, 414 Florida standards, 13 shifts. And we have all these shifts spelled out word for word for word, if anybody wants it. This is just a summary sheet. And 3 total changes. And look at the percentages down below. So no one is going to argue with us that Common Core and Florida standards are not aligned, and that the Florida standards assessment is, in fact, very aligned to Common Core.
Well, those numbers are interesting.
They are, and I think one of the things, this is Amy, one of the things that kind of drives home my thought that we need to kind of change the conversation a little bit to our elected friends is that, you know, our team here at Seminole County took a lot of time to go through every single one of those standards word by word to find what the differences were. They then sent them to DOE and asked, We are asking for you to verify what we have found. Could you please tell us if we are correct? Basically, can you tell us if the shape that we have drawn on this piece of paper is a square? Just confirm for us that the shape is a square. And the response that I believe we got back from DOE said, we're going to tell you that what you have is the color purple. We asked you to confirm if the shape is a square, and their response was purple. The response was so completely disjointed and not even in any response to what they were asked of, and they never answered the question. So at this point in time, I threw my hands up in the air and just said, forget it. From my perspective, from an elected perspective, I don't think there's any point in us engaging with DOE. Obviously, our staff needs to continue to do what they need to do, but that was where my frustration level hit its max.
Thank you.
And then Sean, go to the next slide. I want you, and I don't even have to go through this, but it's a good reference for anybody who's working on all this. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. The one with time, because Erica hit it very well. Here's where I'm going to let Dr. Cody's here, our Deputy Superintendent. I'm going to have her just work you through this particular slide. But she put a lot of time into it.
So if you look at the top row and the column headers there, you'll see by grade we've identified the days in the testing window that DOE provides, but then every district selects the number of days that they need depending on their resources, scheduling, and so forth. So you can see for Seminole, what we did as far as number of days impacted by the test, and then similar to what you showed, Erica, and I'm anxious to read your paper. It looks pretty impressive. We looked at the number of minutes that were impacted by testing, and then you can see that we totaled that up. We then, we used Iowa and PSAT, but any other norm reference test could be used as well. And you can see that we totaled up the number of minutes that would be impacted either for just English language arts and mathematics or for the complete battery, which would give us some information on science and now social studies, which is in the recent legislation. And so the comparison of the instructional minutes taken for testing are far less in conjunction with all of the other points that were made by speakers prior to what I've just shared on this phone call today. We especially brought up the half-day testing time for PSAT compared with the number of days of testing time that our high school students have to spend for ELA. So that's what that chart addresses. And again, it's to show that the impact to instructional time doesn't really have to be what it is, even based on just the test selection, not even thinking about all of the variables that occur with the number of computers you have in a school and so forth.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll be able to give students who are going to take the SAT a Saturday back, right?
Exactly.
Well, that's right, and that was something that was brought up by parents. And, one of our parent comments was, I don't know any colleges that ask for an FSA score.
That's a great line.
Yeah, so, our parents that are communicating with us are very much in support of reducing all this testing and getting meaningful data to help them help their kids.
That's great. Any more questions before we go on to the next steps? Anyone?
I'm excited. This is Amy. I'm ready for next steps.
All right. With no further business before us, let's move to next steps. So how do you envision this working, Amy? I know that you've had some calls and done some grassroots things on your own, but let's try to formalize and see, where we can go and what we can do with this.
Right. Well, I think obviously this is huge. Just getting the coalition together to start talking about it in an official way. Maybe if the board or the members were able to vote support of it, of the solution, whatever we want to call it, would be fantastic. But I think at this point, if we have some key legislators that would be willing to work with us, we have two lobbying firms that we work with here in Seminole County, Metz Hudson Doughton, Ali Livy Schoonover, and Southern Strategies, Alex Setzer, both of whom have been incredibly helpful and supportive and are willing to, obviously, work with us to help get the things done in Tallahassee that we need, get the stars aligned, if you will, in Tallahassee that need to be done in order to help get some traction on this. If we could work as a concerted effort as a team in terms of finding legislative sponsorship, that would be huge. At this point in time, I think that's something we need to move on very quickly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so next steps. We put this meeting together on, I think, a day's notice, just a little over a day's notice, so that board members who have meetings tomorrow would be able to bring it up, at least in member matters, to move the issue forward at their local districts. But I think, Jeff, we can have our executive team meet perhaps tomorrow or Thursday. I'm in New Hampshire tomorrow. But if we could meet Thursday and perhaps do an official thing, and is there any interest in forming a committee on assessment?
I think it's a great idea, Sean. I think we need to, when we have our regular call-in, call-out Thursday, this needs to be a big topic of it. And if I could just interject, I really appreciate Dr. Mandel being on the call, and of course Amy and Erica. I mean, the information is powerful, and what we got to do now is find the maximum, the most effective way to get this out to everyone, because just those few slides that Dr. Griffin went through, I mean, they just make so much sense. And just if I might add, I thought that letter from the DOE from Pam Stewart was very terse and was very weak, frankly. So I'm glad to hear you believe that as well.
All right. So I'm assuming that those in attendance would be interested. Well, an invitation will come out perhaps for a committee if when the board meets or whatever. Certainly that would be a step in the right direction. Then we'll coordinate our efforts as far as social media and legislative platform.
Hey, Sean, this is Bridget. I just have a quick question. As far as a committee, and Amy and maybe Erica, you guys can interject and let us know. Do you have any specific people around the state that are champions and knowledgeable on these topics? Because it is a very complex topic, and I will be the first to say that I understand it to a degree, but not to the level where where I want from a champion side. I'm so glad that you guys are where you guys are at. Is there any other people that we can reach out to that would help promote from the committee side to strengthen the program or the solution?
I think at this point, this is just my perspective, I think most school board members, we're all still in learning mode. We're very fortunate that in Seminole County that we have an executive team that's willing to educate us. I'm not an educator. I've just learned a tiny little bit from what I've been able to pick up here. So I think continuing to educate will probably help to raise up some more champions.
Okay.
I think at this point, most school board members, my perception is that this depth of knowledge is not there, and it's not through any fault of their own. It's just, it is a very, very complicated topic.
Right. Okay. Well, and I agree. Like I said, I have no problem admitting that the depth of it isn't right. I mean, I don't necessarily know that I have my hands wrapped around it. So any advice when I'm talking to other members who are interested, because I did talk to some people who couldn't make it on tonight, what our next steps are and how, they can allow themselves to be more informed and what that committee looks like. So whatever your guys' thoughts are, please just share them with us so that we can help elevate this to other members who are interested, because this is definitely a pain point for everyone.
Right. Well, I think what we'd like to do, if it works out for you all, is if we want to schedule a go-to meeting or a couple of them, and our Seminole County team could serve as the host for some education. We could do a couple of classes and go through this with whoever would like to.
And maybe
Great.
co-present Mark and Erica to anybody who wants this information.
I think it's a great idea. I really think it's a great idea. I mean, just going through with tonight, it's the more knowledge board members have, the more empowered they're going to feel to run with it. Obviously, with any situation, it would be the same. So I think that's a great idea.
Great. And we should be able to make this again. I was recording, so we should be able to make this video available on our website. And,
great.
And that way, if they can't make it, they'll have no excuse really, because we have an asynchronous education program.
Right.
Yeah. What do you guys think about doing it publicly for parents as well? I mean, if we're going to look at affecting the legislators, it's going to take more than just school board members reaching out to them and putting pressure on them to go our way when we start making proposals. So I think maybe once we get something a little more concrete, we want to do this same kind of education, maybe a half an hour for the public, and get them on board to contacting their legislators.
Absolutely. I think that's critical.
I do too, and I think that was something that was a failed side of what happened, what transpired before this. I don't think that people from the ground level were included in that discussion, and I think that's where a lot of the frustration and disconnect happen. So I definitely think we need to do that.
Yes, and maybe get a teacher's story in there too, so that
yeah, I'm huge on that.
Yeah, facts tell, but stories sell. If we're trying
that and also I think I was in a meeting this week, and the implementation, but it's such a key part. And obviously we're not there yet because we haven't finalized the solution, but integrating people who are on the front lines and it can help us look at what that to help us what that looks like. So the plan. Not just implementation, but the plan to implement it essentially effectively. So again, I think that's down the way because we're still trying to hone in on what that looks like, what the shell of it is. But I'm big on definitely trying to incorporate people who are in the classroom to help us with some things that we may not think of since we're in the boardroom, per se.
Great. So within the next 7 days.
Throw in a couple.
Yes, Senator.
I've got 2 or 3 thoughts, if I may, and not really in the order of importance necessarily, but I'm familiar with a booklet published by the Heartland Institute by Dr. David Anderson. The title of it is Replacing Common Core with Proven Standards of Excellence. And while I know the conversation tonight is centered on testing, I think that it would be time well invested for folks to make themselves familiar with what Dr. Anderson has to say. Simply put, he's advocating abandoning the Common Core garbage and replacing it with ACT, the standards and the tests and everything, which will give us that practically instantaneous results that we all want. Ms. Lockhart, I would love for you to forward to me the correspondence back and forth between the Department of Education when you asked the question that they didn't answer and the ludicrous answer that they gave you. I'd like to have that and make it as inclusive as you can. And then also from a strategy standpoint, I don't know the legislators with whom y'all have spoken, but if you don't have a solid, unwavering commitment from the chairman of the Education Policy Committee, you'll never get to first base. Those two people, John Legg in the Senate and Fresen is the appropriations chair, I believe, in the House, and Marlene O'Toole is the education council chairman. I'm not that familiar with the House governing structure since I left over there 5 years ago, but nevertheless, if you don't have Marlene and John Legg on board, your bill will never get heard. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that the bill not being heard will happen this year. I think that they would probably get on board, but you need to make certain before you file a bill that you've got that commitment. If you don't get that commitment, or if you don't feel comfortable with that commitment, then find yourself reliable legislators who will file amendments at the appropriate time to the education bill. That's how we got the testing validation put on this year. And the reason for that is because if you have a bill that hasn't been favorably approved by at least one committee, that bill cannot, the text of that bill cannot be used as an amendment to another bill. And there's a reason for that. We don't need to go into that right now, but the fact is, previous years there were Common Core bills, repealing Common Core bills that never got heard because the chairman of the committee was opposed to the bill. Consequently, the only effective way to get around that chairman is to wait until the bill gets to the floor and then put amendments on it. And I would also add that Senator Montford would be, I think, an excellent sponsor for this legislation. He's really, I don't need to tell you all about Bill Montford and his career in education and his respect by his peers there in the Senate as well. So with that, one other question I had, Sean, is do you plan to bring up the cost of the testing, the financial cost of testing?
I haven't had an opportunity to review that, but that's certainly one of the factors that, the F in our values is fiscal responsibility, and having a handle around how much everything has cost, both in direct and opportunity costs, when comparing the different models, I think is key to steering the conversation.
All right. Well, what we're talking about is data that I sent to Sean today. And it's I'm doing some deeper digging on this data, but just this one chart shows that in the last 4 years, NCS Pearson Incorporated has signed contracts, recurring budgetary amounts, $468 million. The total amount of the original contracts were $488,238,000. My question to my colleagues there in the legislature is it really worth $500 million to get the results that we've gotten? I think there is a gross waste of money occurring here. And I'm going to dig into this thing, and this does not count the $145 million, I believe it was, anyhow, over $130 million that was the AIR contract. But I've got to find out how many of these, for instance, the Park Assessment Administration and the Park Item Development, those were big contracts, and if they were paid, that was a total waste of money. But I'm trying to do some more digging to find out about that. But that was an absolutely stunning sum of more than $488 million that we're paying to get a school grade. Mm-hmm. I think not.
Thank you, Senator. And yes, I will be forwarding all that information after this meeting. I'll send links to the other two documents again to everyone, as well as those. I just didn't have an opportunity to load them up into the website so that I could just share them as a link. I have them as raw documents. So does it make sense then to attempt to arrange another meeting within the next 10 days? Is that a reasonable approach?
I think so, Sean, yeah.
Okay, great. So what I'll do is, obviously Tuesdays are out. I guess I'll propose a couple dates via email and we'll take it from there.
Sounds like a good plan.
All right, Jeff, I'll hand it back to you.
Good stuff.
Thank you everyone for participating, and final thoughts by Jeff Burgosh.
Well, I just, again, I want to thank all you folks for coming on and sharing the ideas, and I think the more that we can do to get the message, and I agree with Senator Hayes, and that is a lot of money to spend, and I'm glad to hear that he's going to be digging in. I intend to talk to Senator Gates as well, and maybe I know that he's attenuated to all of these things as well, so I just appreciate people giving their time. I know it's tough during the week just to stay up late, but it's important, so we're going to stay on it. We're going to do what we can to help, and I just say thanks again.
Okay. Any last questions?
This is Amy. Thank you so much for getting this group together, and again, you know, Seminole County stands ready to help organize whatever needs to be done. And thank you, Senator Hayes. We hope maybe for an upcoming presentation we might be able to include more of your contemporaries. It would be wonderful to have more legislators understand what it is that we're working on.
I think you're absolutely correct, and I think they would find it refreshing to pick up on the spirit of this meeting. I think yeah, you're certainly off to a great start.
Well, thank you.
Okay, but nothing more before us. We'll stand adjourned. Semper Fi, God bless.
Thank you.
All right, got it.